What if I told you that the secret to becoming completely fluent in English doesn't involve, opening a single grammar textbook, and it actually requires you to completely ignore like 99% of the words you see on a page?
I mean, it sounds like terrible advice, especially if you measure learning by how traditional schools operate. But that counterintuitive approach is exactly what we are getting into today.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. For you listening right now, our mission today is to explore a radically effective, entirely self-directed method for mastering the English language.
Right.
We're basically bypassing the expensive language institutes, the private tutors, and the overwhelming anxiety of trying to memorize a dictionary.
Which is vital context to establish right up front. Think about who really needs a method like this.
Yeah, definitely.
We aren't talking about a university student who has, 4 free hours a day to study linguistics. This is built for people who are fundamentally time poor or just resource strapped.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about stay-at-home parents managing toddlers, or an office worker pulling a 50-hour week, or maybe someone living in a rural area where there isn't a language center within 100 miles.
Exactly the demographic. It's about learning how to learn when the traditional system simply isn't an option for you. You kind of have to manufacture your own immersion.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's unpack the actual toolkit for this, because it is aggressively analog.
Oh, very much so.
You don't need a fancy app, and you don't need a software subscription. You basically need a physical newspaper, or a magazine, or even a book like Harry Potter.
Yeah, anything physical.
You need a highlighter, a ballpoint pen, and some lined paper. And that is the entire barrier to entry.
And while a book works, a daily physical newspaper is actually the gold standard for this method.
Really? One newspaper? Like, why not just read a great novel?
Well, because a newspaper gives you what linguists call situational vocabulary.
Okay.
Like if you read a fantasy novel, you learn a lot of words about dragons and castles.
Right, which isn't super helpful at the grocery store.
Exactly. But if you open a newspaper, you get distinct contextual buckets. You have a column on healthcare reform right next to a piece on a political election.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and that sits above a story about a judicial review or financial markets. You are exposing yourself to the vocabulary of real-world human situations across dozens of domains.
That tracks. You want the language of daily life.
Precisely.
So I have my newspaper, I have my pen.
Uh-huh.
The very first step of this method involves picking just one single news story for the day. And you physically take your pen and draw a bold box around that specific story.
Yes, a physical box.
Now, my initial thought here is this just a basic psychological trick to keep you from feeling overwhelmed? Like, hey, don't look at the whole broadsheet, just look here.
It definitely prevents cognitive overload, but the mechanism is actually much deeper than just a psychological comfort blanket.
Okay, how so?
We have to look at how the visual cortex processes information. When you stare at a full newspaper page, your brain is taking in thousands of data points.
Right, it's a lot.
And its natural defense mechanism is to filter out what it doesn't understand. It creates this wall of noise.
It's just a giant sea of gray text.
Yes, but when you physically take a pen and draw a hard, bold boundary around one block of text, you are sending a neurological signal.
A signal.
Yeah, you are creating a localized constraint. You are giving your brain literal permission to lower its defense mechanisms because you've promised it that nothing outside of that drawn box matters for the rest of the day.
Wow, you're isolating the target.
Exactly.
So the box is drawn, the target is locked. But the next step is where I really struggle with this whole concept.
The reading phase.
Yes, because once that story is boxed, you have to read it. But you don't read it once or twice. You have to read that exact same news story 20 times in a row.
20 consecutive reads.
Yes.
I have to push back on this.
I know, it sounds crazy. Because reading a 5-paragraph story about a city council meeting 20 times sounds like sheer agony. I mean, most people are going to quit by read number 8 out of pure boredom. What is actually happening in my brain on read 14 that makes this torture worthwhile?
Well, it helps to think about how neural pathways actually form in the brain. Like, imagine you are standing at the edge of a dense forest and you need to get to a cabin on the other side.
Okay, I'm with you.
The first time you walk through, there is no path. You are bushwhacking, tripping over roots, getting hit by branches. It is exhausting and slow.
Right, that's read number 1, total friction.
Exactly. But if you walk that exact same route 20 times, what happens?
I guess you wear down a path.
Yes, you trample the grass, you snap the branches, you pack down the dirt. By the 20th time, you have created a smooth, hard-packed dirt road. You can walk it without even thinking about your feet.
So you're saying the first 20 reads aren't actually about understanding the story at all? You're paving the dirt road?
That is the crucial distinction. People get frustrated because they try to achieve comprehension on the first pass.
Which is impossible if you don't know the words.
Right. The first 20 reads of this method are strictly about biological familiarity, not comprehension.
You know, I was trying to wrap my head around this earlier, and it made me think about how we process human faces.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Yeah, so then you go to a networking event, and you meet 3 new people. Let's call them Irfan, Saad, and Junaid. You shake their hands, you hear their names. But if you don't see them again for 3 months, and one of them waves at you in the grocery store, you have no idea who they are.
You completely blank.
Exactly. You're squinting, trying to place the face. You have to awkwardly ask them for their name again.
What's fascinating here is that that is a perfect parallel.
Really?
Yes, the brain biologically treats new vocabulary the exact same way it treats human faces.
Wow.
It cannot pick up the subtle contours, the syllables, and the true essence of a new word unless it passes in front of your retinas repeatedly.
So it needs that exposure to move from short-term anomaly to, like, recognized pattern.
Without those 20 reads, those English words are just alien symbols.
Right.
By letting the syllables hit your eyes over and over, your visual processing center stops treating them as foreign threats and starts recognizing them as familiar shapes. You're basically just spending time getting acquainted with Irfan, Saad, and Junaid before you ask them deep personal questions.
Okay, that makes so much sense. So the dirt road is paved, the syllables look familiar, but familiarity isn't comprehension. I still don't know what the words actually mean.
True.
So how do we bridge that gap? Because on read number 21, the rules change entirely.
Now the passive exposure ends and the active extraction begins. On the 21st pass, you finally pick up your highlighter.
Finally.
Yeah, you go through that familiar text and highlight every single word you still don't understand.
We bring in the lined paper.
Yeah.
And the format here is completely non-negotiable. You draw 4 columns, word, meaning, synonym, and antonym.
Yes, that specific structure.
But I want to pause on the physical act of doing this, because the absolute strictest rule of this method is that you must write these columns out by hand. I know everyone listening is thinking, can I just build a spreadsheet or type this into a flashcard app? Why the mandate against laptops?
Because typing is neurologically homogeneous, while handwriting is neurologically heterogeneous.
Okay, you're going to have to explain that. What does that mean in plain English?
Well, when you type on a keyboard, the physical action required to produce the letter A is exactly the same physical action required to produce the letter Z.
It's just tapping a key.
Exactly. It's just a downward tap of a finger. Your brain requires very little fine motor control, and it processes the action incredibly fast.
Meaning it goes in one ear and out the other?
Usually, yes. But when you write a word by hand, you have to physically form the unique spatial shape of every single letter, the loops, the crosses, descenders.
It takes more effort.
A lot more. You are engaging your fine motor skills, which slows your brain down. This forces a much deeper neurological connection between the haptic feedback of your hand and the semantic meaning of the word. You are literally carving the word into your muscle memory.
You're forcing the brain to spend time with the word, and while you are doing this, you're obviously using a tool like Google to find the definitions.
Yes, you have to look them up.
But we need to highlight how Google is used here because it's brilliant. We all know Google Translate has that little speaker icon, but most people use it so passively. Here, it's an active neurological trigger.
It has to be active. You search the word and you don't just read the definition. You click the speaker icon. You listen to the American pronunciation.
Right.
Then you switch it and listen to the British pronunciation.
Right.
You are deliberately overwriting your own native accent by mimicking the digital voice out loud.
Then you find the synonym, a word that means the same thing.
Yeah.
Then the antonym, the exact opposite.
Yes.
Like, if the word is abundance, you need to know scarcity. And finally, you find an example of the word used in a full sentence.
Which completely solves the greatest flaw in traditional language learning. Think about those massive vocabulary books people buy.
Oh, I've tried that. You try to cram 5,000 words in a month.
Exactly. And what happened?
You just stare at lists of arbitrary words, and they completely evaporate from your brain by the next morning.
Because the brain is extremely efficient at deleting useless information, words learned in a vacuum have no context, so the brain just discards them.
Makes sense.
But with this method, you are extracting 20 to 40 unknown words from a story you have already read 20 times.
Wait, yeah, you already know the plot. You know the characters. You know what happened.
Yes. So when you finally define that complex word, your brain naturally glues it to the narrative of the story. It becomes situational.
Oh, wow.
You aren't just learning the word litigation, you are anchoring it to the story about the tech company being sued that you just spent an hour visualizing.
It's rooted in the reality of the box you drew. Okay, so we've paved the road, we've pulled out the vocabulary, we've mapped the synonyms and antonyms, and we've built the muscle memory. We're done for the day, right?
Not quite yet.
Of course not.
Because now you take your list of definitions, you go back to the newspaper, and you read the box story 5 more times.
5 more times.
This is where the heavy lifting pays off.
Because at this stage, after the initial exposure and the vocabulary extraction, reading it those 5 additional times means you are going to understand roughly 70% of that text.
Exactly.
A piece of dense English that was entirely alien to you an hour ago is now 70% comprehensible.
Which sets up the crucial final step. You have mapped the words on paper, but mapping doesn't mean you can process the language in real-time conversation.
Right, reading is different from hearing.
So we make the audiovisual leap.
And this is where it gets really cool. You take the headline of your boxed story, say it's about a global climate summit or a central bank interest rate hike, and you search that exact headline on YouTube or Google.
Yes, because news is inherently global. That exact same event you just dissected in print will inevitably have 10 to 15 video reports from different international media outlets.
And the rule is you watch every single one of them.
Every single one. If we connect this to the bigger picture, think about the sensory loop you have just constructed for yourself.
Walk me through that loop, because it's fascinating.
Okay, first, you visually absorbed the text. Second, you physically, haptically wrote the vocabulary.
Right.
Third, you verbally spoke the words out loud to correct your pronunciation. And now, fourth, you are sitting back and hearing native speakers, news anchors, reporters, interviewees.
All from different channels.
Exactly, with different accents, discussing the exact same topic using the exact same vocabulary.
You're basically attacking the language from every possible sensory angle. You aren't just reading words anymore. You are witnessing real human beings deploy those words in real life.
It aggressively improves your listening comprehension because your brain is already primed. When the news anchor says that difficult word, your brain instantly recognizes it because your hand literally just wrote it 10 minutes ago.
Okay, let me challenge something here, though.
Sure.
We just went through this entire exhaustive daily routine, and neither of us has mentioned a comma, a past participle, or a split infinitive.
Nope.
How does anyone actually learn to structure a proper sentence? Because this method seemed to completely ignore grammar.
That is the most common pushback this method receives.
I believe it.
And it reveals a fundamental flaw in how we view education. You don't need a rule book for grammar because engaging in this 25-read cycle forces implicit learning.
Implicit learning, like learning by osmosis.
Kind of. In cognitive science, it's often referred to as statistical learning. The human brain is the most powerful pattern recognition machine on Earth. Okay. Think about how children learn their native language. They don't study subject-verb agreement before they start talking.
No, they definitely don't.
They just listen to millions of sentences.
They hear the pattern until a deviation from that pattern simply sounds wrong. Like they just know it's off.
Exactly that. When you read the same well-edited paragraph 24 times, you subconsciously absorb the syntax. You naturally start to feel where the writer's voice pauses for a comma.
Oh, wow.
You feel the cadence of a sentence coming to a hard stop. You intuitively grasp why inverted commas are used for a quote, or how past tense verbs alter the rhythm of a phrase.
So you basically bypass the anxiety of memorizing rules because your brain has already reverse engineered the underlying physics of the language.
Exactly. You internalize the rules without ever once sitting down to study them.
Okay, doing this for one story makes for a highly productive afternoon, but the true trajectory of this method is built around a long-term goal, a 300-day horizon.
300 news stories, which works out to roughly 10 months of consistent daily practice.
What actually happens over those 10 months? Because initially, Spending an hour or two on a single paragraph seems incredibly slow.
It is slow at first,
Yeah,
but a massive compounding effect takes over because the global news cycle repeats itself. There are only so many core subjects in the world.
right. You have healthcare, politics, economics, technology, and law. Those are basically the buckets.
But because the topics repeat, the vocabulary inevitably repeats. The highly technical words you highlighted and defined in story number 4 are going to show up again in story number 20 and again in story number 50.
Oh, I see. You've already paved the dirt road for those words.
By the time you reach story number 100, the amount of highlighting you need to do drops off a cliff.
Because you know Irfan, Saad, and Junaid incredibly well by day 100. They're your close friends now.
Exactly.
You don't have to ask their names anymore. So what does this all mean? When you finally cross that 300 story mark for you listening, think about what your daily reality looks like. You have achieved complete independence.
Total independence.
You don't need a tutor checking your work. You don't need a translation app. You can pick up an English newspaper anywhere in the world and read it effortlessly.
I agree, but the implication of that 10-month journey goes far beyond just language fluency.
How so?
At that 300-day stage, you haven't just learned how to read the daily news. You have built the neurological capacity to process incredibly dense information.
So the skill transfers.
Absolutely. The stamina you built allows you to pick up heavy intellectual biographies. You can read deep philosophy. You can parse complex academic research papers.
Because you trained your brain to handle density.
Right. Because you were using global news as your textbook, the method didn't just teach you the mechanics of English syntax, it simultaneously turned you into a deeply informed, highly capable global citizen.
You acquired vast knowledge of the world, while the language just quietly installed itself in the background of your brain.
It is a total transformation of capability.
So just to summarize this incredible arc, you start out paralyzed by the idea of learning English. You think you need money and endless free time. Instead, you just buy a paper, take a pen, and draw a hard boundary around a single column of text.
Just one box.
You endure the friction of the 20-read loop to pave the neural pathways. You extract the vocabulary by hand to build muscle memory. You trigger the audiovisual loop to conquer your listening skills. And you let statistical learning handle the grammar.
It's elegant.
10 months later, you are intellectually independent.
It shifts the entire paradigm of self-education, and I think there is a broader takeaway here that extends beyond linguistics. I want you to consider the underlying psychology of the drawn box and the 25 repetitions.
What do you mean?
Well, we frame this entirely around learning English, but what other seemingly impossible, overwhelmingly complex skills in your life could you conquer with this framework?
Oh, interesting.
Whether it's understanding the complexities of global financial markets, learning a new programming language, or diving into a dense scientific field.
The principles are universal.
They are. What could you master if you simply stopped trying to learn everything all at once, drew a localized box around one tiny piece of the puzzle, and exposed your brain to it 25 times?
That is a phenomenal question to leave off on. Stop staring at the peak of the mountain and just draw a box around the first rock. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.